So about 1 week ago, LumiRank made an announcement, and I honestly forgot to talk about it on this channel. I think I talked about it on the Stride podcast with some people last week, but I forgot to make a video about it on my main channel, so I wanted to talk about the changes to the LumiRank seasons that have been announced and what it means for the future coming up. So yeah, let's get into it. Of course, subscribe, etc. But yeah, so LumiRank, of course, last year, LumiRank is the main body that makes rankings, the most official in any capacity, even though there are multiple different ranking things. But this year, they decided instead of a full year ranking, they're going to have 2 6-month ranking periods. This first season ends July 14th, 2024, which I believe is the weekend after Smash Factor or of Smash Factor. No events past this ranking will count for the first part. You must have 4 tiered events to be ranked, and 1 must be a major, an A tier or higher, and 2024 overall will not be a full year ranking season. Any event during 2024, the first part will not count towards the second part, which will be its own season. And of course, that makes a lot of sense, right? I think there are 2 main ways to do ranking systems, which is either full year or half year. And, previously the PGR did half year most of the time, and then sometimes they would do half year, then full year in the second half of the year. But it always got a little confusing because we didn't know what things were being weighed. And I think this makes a lot of sense, right? I feel like, especially with how many events happen for Smash Ultimate, having a one full year ranking is crazy. I think last year they did a half year and then the full year. But again, that was a little weird because if you already messed up at the beginning part of the year, it felt really difficult to come back and be a super high ranked person. And one bad event, especially at the top of the top, one bad event could essentially doom anyone's full year chances. And that honestly happened with Mia, who had a really, really bad beginning of the year, and then obviously, in my opinion, became the second best player in the world. And he was ranked 4th or 5th because he got 65th at literally the first major in January. I know he lost to, who was it? Strix, I think that was the Australian Sephiroth player. So that happens, right? You lose one event, especially when you're at the top and you're constantly everyone else is getting 2nd, 3rd, 4th, that's going to hurt, right? And it's one of the reasons that Akola was number 1. Akola was amazing regardless, but Spargo doing poorly at Summit and SmashCon, Sonic's doing poorly at SmashCon, and Mia having that early bad performance kind of just was okay, well, Akola didn't have one of those and also won the biggest event of the year in SmashCon, so that is going to lead players to be higher ranked. But this year we got 6 months clean, 6 months clean. Of course, I can make a video of who I think is currently ranked super high if you are interested in that. But yeah, it's a little bit interesting. And again, no, there will be no overlap. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is a previous tweet made by a LumiRank member, Stuart98, who basically says, hey, he's responding to a tweet of why do you do a full year thing? And this was in January 30th of this year, so this isn't multiple years old. This is very, very recent, relatively, right? A full year gives us data to do a top 100, an ordered 101 to 150 beyond that, even though that's also just a top 150 ranking. I don't know why it's not just a 150 ranking, but whatever. They have top 200s for NA and Japan and a top 100 for AU. If we revert to just 6-month seasons, I think all of that goes away and we're just back to a big 50 player release. If that's what people want, then we might end up doing that, but let's not pretend that there's not trade-offs here. And I have a suspicion as soon as we'd make the change to a 6-month season, all of a sudden people will start to complain about how full year would be so much better, because again, a lot of people were complaining about the full year last year. So much of this Discord is just thermostatic grass is greener on the other side, and to be honest, after seeing it for 6 years, I'm kind of annoyed by it, because Stuart also worked on the PGR, so it's been a long time. And then Yoda Cage, top Bowser Jr. player, says, is top 100 really not feasible with 6 months rankings? I feel a hell of a lot better about the algorithm's output in the 51 to 100 range for a full year than I do in the mid-year. And again, that makes sense, right, that last part, because you are thinking about all these different players in all these different regions, a lot of players that haven't gone to a ton, some players that have attended a ton, and trying to weigh all of those different factors against each other, especially with the varying tiers of all of these tournaments, can be incredibly difficult. I feel like the difference between someone that's ranked 49th and someone that's ranked 65th can be very small, and if one thing is changed in the algorithm, suddenly that entirely flips on its head, right? Maybe it values consistency more, maybe it values peaks more because you get that many points, right? Let's say if Hurt does really poorly in Golden Week, but he won Battle of BC, that might, keep him very, very high, even though in a long-term season, like we saw last year, a couple of bad placements can really, really affect the top level. But now let's get back into the earlier stuff that he talked about. Full year is a top 100, but again, this isn't a full year, so probably not. We're probably getting rid of the 101 to 150. We're probably getting rid of the 200s for NA and Japan and the top 100 for EU because it's going to be a 6-month season. And I've seen a couple of people be like, oh, well, why don't they just do that at the end of the year anyway? But that's literally just what they did last year, and they wouldn't have announced a change. So they're not gonna do that. That seems like a ridiculous amount of work to like basically make 2 different ranking systems. Like, why would they do a 6-month, the final 6 months of the year, like part 2, and then also have a yearly top 100 and also all of these things? Like, that's a ridiculous amount of work for basically no reason. And I really think that this, like, to me, I don't really care either way of a full year top 100 or 2 6-month periods at this point. I mean, I don't go to enough to really think I'm going to be super high unless I win every other tournament I'm going to, like for this year. So it's not like personally affecting me, so I don't really have a stake in this. But I do think that a lot of people's complaints about the current system are going to be exacerbated with this top 50 because, again, I want to go to the TTS. So of course the tournaments that are the most important are going to have the most points, right? Currently Genesis X is our number 1, Umebura SP10 is next. We have Kowloon number 9 with Sumabato, we have Luminosity Makes Moves, Collision, Battle of BC, King Kong, and then a couple of Japanese tournaments down here, and then basically everything under this is no longer a major. But of course this is Golden Week, so there are going to be multiple majors this week in Japan to really stack this in Japan's favor. And again, I personally think Japan deserves it. That's not me like being like, oh, Japan's getting too many things. Because like Delta number 8, which is happening like 2 days from now, as of recording this, is a P tier. It will be the 3rd highest tournament. And then the number 1 tournament is down here at Kaganimi number 12 with 12,000 points. 12,912. It's going to be like an entire 1,000 points above Genesis, basically, which is kind of ridiculous. And of course, Japan has a ton of tournaments already. Literally like half of the majors basically are from Japan because we have, what, 5 out of the 7, 9, 12. So they're one off from being half, and after this week, they will be half. And of course, there will be other majors this year, but I'm pretty sure the only other S tier confirmed this part of the year is Gommel, which is in a couple weeks in Canada. But that's like an S tier, so it's like down here, which is not going to be nearly the points of the 2 P tiers coming up in Japan. And then after that, we don't have any confirmed S tiers. Of course, there probably will be things that are announced, or I don't know if like Smash Factor is going to get to S or whatever. But yeah, like it's going to be very heavy in Japan's favor overall, because it's not like every single US player can go to every single US tournament, whereas most Japanese players can go to most Japanese tournaments just because of their travel infrastructure. So I think that a lot of people's issues with the current LumiRank, which honestly also kind of talks about like people talking about like, oh, I can't believe that Level Up Expo wasn't a major, but Sumabato or whatever happened this weekend was bigger. But then like we can also look at how many Japanese players there are in the top 100, and then how many Japanese players are worth points, and it kind of grows and grows, and the system is going to become more in favor of Japanese tournaments. Again, I personally think they deserve it. I think it's the hardest region in the world, and the fact that so many players are inconsistent in Japan but very consistent in the United States, like think Proto Banham. By the way, hope Proto Banham feels better from his announcement. But like those type of things matter, right? And so the players that do get consistency in Japan, like Akola and Mia, are simply ridiculous, right? But I'm going to count of the top 50 and 100 how many players are Japanese. So of the top 100, 50 players are from Japan. Half of the ranking is Japanese. And of the top 50, 25 of them are Japanese. But again, this system that wasn't like, I feel like this season in 2024, it wasn't super favored for Japan. But then like in terms of like, I feel like there was an even amount of tournaments, and Golden Week like obviously helps in terms of the year-long ranking. But in the 6-month rankings, so many people, like so many players in Japan, or like so many tournaments in Japan have been highly ranked. Again, we are going to have about half, we're going to have more than half of the majors, or I guess half including Gommel of the majors strictly in Japan. Sorry, for super majors, my bad. And then majors, we're going to have about half, and then every other section has more Japanese things than anything else, and maybe except for the C tiers, but again, those don't really matter that much relative to all of these other tournaments. So I feel like overall people are going to, or it's going to get more and more in favor of the Japanese, which again, I personally find is fine because the Japanese players are really strong and they're definitely the best region in the world. But I feel like a lot of people are having issue with that for some reason, and I feel like that is going to get worse with these 6-month rankings for sure, because obviously if you're able to pump out a bunch of majors, and you know a lot of people can go to them, then that's going to be a crazy thing. And the crazy thing about that is like Akola's not even going to a lot. Akola's literally been to like one, I think, major this year, and Japan still has a bunch of these majors. So if Akola was like competing more, then all of these like B tiers that they have would be A tiers, and their A tiers would be S tiers, because Akola is the #1 player and worth a ton of points. And simply he's not going because he's tired or is, you know, focusing on school or whatever he's doing. I don't know. I haven't talked to Akola ever, other than congratulating him when because he's really good. But yeah, what do you think about the LumiRank sync month? Again, I think it's personally a good thing because you don't have to worry. Like, I know players like Spargo worry a lot about like, oh man, I did poorly at a couple of events, therefore my entire potential for being #1 this year is shot. I feel like having a reset in the middle of the year is nice, but I do think it's going to have results that people aren't necessarily fond of, because people are already pretending that the bias of this system is for Japan when it's not at all. But you know, that's something else we can talk about another time. As always, social media, Stride, and important stuff is down below. Keep doing what you're doing, LumiRank. I'm a big fan, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.